This is hard to do as I've been planning to do this for a while, but this is me from post editing. I had to stop here because I never said this. The reason I have not made this video for so long is I have just been trying to be respectful of my father, his family, not come off as this being an attack on him for because it's how I am and the type of person I am. Any of that. I was trying to I was going to do this video after he passed away, after everything settled down, and after I processed that. But again, I'm not going to afford the luxury of that to someone because again, I don't think he's going to see this. I don't think any of my family will see this, but there's always that chance. I'm not going to send this to anybody saying, "Here, check this out and share this with dad," but there's that chance. But I'm not going to put off what's better for me right now for someone who's going to say the things and do the things that you're going to be introduced to. I want to make that very clear. I could have been making this video has been going on in my head for months and months. But as things have progressed with my father in terms of his health and his window and his family, which is not an ideal situation, I'm not trying to introduce anything into that. But I'm not going to extend courtesies to people who won't reciprocate. And that's it. So I wanted to paint that crystal clear. Sorry about the bust in. This is hard to do as I've been planning to do this for a while. But in fact, before we get into that, I am going to say things that may sound mean. I'm going to say things that are just honest but tough. As tough to hear on your end as they are to say and to have dealt with. And I will talk about it later, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about, the second or tertiary problems stem from people being judgmental or simply not believing me, and that was tough. I'll talk more about that later. But the importance of it now is some of these things I will say that will sound mean. Without context, you may not understand, and hopefully you can. But if I say something, either preface it or after and in conclusion, something like, I don't mean this mean, or I can only promise you this is just coming from a place of good intentions. My words don't always match what I'm trying to say, which is a problem in this. But so, if you judge me, that's your problem. And in one way, this is about finding the freedom to shed those chains if you are a random person or if you're someone directly or indirectly involved in this. But I want to talk about the importance of fatherhood. And what I was starting with, I believe, was I've been navigating this in my head for a while. I need to do this, but I didn't want people to misconstrue it as a personal attack or being insensitive. And to be honest, I spent a lot of time, and I had a conversation with my sister about it. Hopefully this will come up in this, but saying I've been trying so hard to humanize my father, and at every turn, every chance, he does it wrong, and not ignorantly so. Now, and I'm going to paint a picture here because I want to put context to this. And this is where I mentioned this coming up in a conversation with my sister. My brother had a falling out with my brother. My, and again, this is where context is very important. My father is dying of cancer. He smoked cigarettes all of his life until being diagnosed. And that's part of what's happening in terms of the emotional spike, I don't know, or why this is all coming to a head, so to speak. And again, it's almost unbelievable. And that's what I say. It's saying this is not easy because, again, I often say you view the world through the lens of your own bias. And my father was not the best father or the best man. And he's dying of cancer. And instead of trying to spend time with people he loves, he's pushing people away. And I get it to a degree, hypothetically, but I can't understand how, in that position, when your son's, again, my brother is inviting my father to an outing, it leads to my father telling my brother and things akin to you should hang yourself, die. You know, just again, I hope that kind of sums it up. Because again, I can't think of any person that I would take the time to go out of my way to say that to. I could maybe say it reflexively, but again, I can't imagine saying I haven't. So that's good. You know, I can't imagine someone getting me to the point where I mean that, but this is all coming to a head, I think, because I'm going to have to start to navigate my father's funeral and landmines. And this is the legacy that you can leave if you're a father. When my parents divorced, I moved away with my mom. My father's answer was to tell everyone that I was insulting them, talking about their children, saying I said things to my father that I didn't say, said I did things just in general that I didn't do. And if I could sum up everything is in regards to my father, it's and this is what again I'm I understood a long time ago and people still don't get. It's your interaction with him is a nothing more than a transaction of sorts, and that's it. If you can be manipulated and he can benefit from you, if you don't know anything about him, it's perfect because then he can ignore all the bad stuff. And if the bad stuff, when it starts to come back up, it's new to those people and he can make new excuses. He's, I don't know if sociopathic or an egomaniac or both of those apply. And, oh yes, I did fill my water. It put me in just so many positions. Again, some of it is just so, and I have not talked with anybody about this in length, a lot of this. So this is kind of traumatic to revisit because then it starts to bring up all these other things that came up. But um, it I don't know. So the legacy my father left for me, sadly, is again, I know this is rambling and I'm sorry, but landmines. Going back, um, when my mother passed away, at my mother's funeral, at at during the eulogy to my mom, I mentioned that my mom made me understand my father, and I'll explain it right now, as a matter of fact, because this was the, the lesson is important, whether I did it right or wrong or not, whatever. But I often, growing up, wrongfully judged my father because if he was not emotional, I don't know any other way to say it. He could talk about himself, he could manipulate others, but he didn't really care. I guess maybe that's where that stems from. Now, again, this is funny how it's coming out. I just don't think he really cared about people. But but to his credit, anytime he could physically, that is a different generation, the generation prior to me. Whereas if the window broke and the pipe exploded at the same time and the heater went out, my father could fix all that. I'd have to call people to fix it. So to his credit, anytime anybody needed something like that, even if they didn't ask for it, even if he saw it, he would do. Now, in hindsight, whether, as I mentioned, what amount of that was him in his head saying, now these people owe me, now I can hold that over their head, now it gives me more leeway to say or do blah blah blah. My mom at least made me question whether my father was legitimate to some degree. And again, this is where I mentioned at that time specifically, my mom changed my entire opinion about my father, and this is where it's so confusing because then that same father that my mom, who was to all intents and purposes a saint, and not just out of my own words, but out of my dad's also. Oh, good. See, this is one of those moments where I just explode and slip. Okay, so I went up there eulogizing my father, basically saying, I'm sorry that I misjudged you all this time. My mom was such a great person. She made me see how wrong I was. And I took that opportunity at my mother's funeral to say I'm sorry to my father for misjudging him, to say, and what I think I said it in essence was, for a long time I misjudged my father on being unemotional, but he expressed that in the way that he could. And just because I don't recognize it doesn't mean he was doing anything wrong. It's the exact opposite. I'm wrong for not seeing it. That same person who my mom convinced me was human then tells, and again, this is excluding anything he's ever said to me, my sister, things I've heard him say to other people. This is just this one snapshot. While my father's dying of cancer and my brother's trying to invite him to a family function, it leads to him saying, again, die, go hang yourself, and all these other things. And I'm not going to try to I've made a decision. I'm not going to try to keep people in my life who are running away. I'm not going to try and chase them down, drag them when they're literally trying to run away from me. Not, just going about their day or going to work or, tired of me for a month or just, people go away for 6 months. They have kids, families, all that. But when people are running away, I'm not going to try to stop them from fleeing from me. I'm not going to sit here and try to humanize someone who just says something like that. Now, he said so much to his brothers and sisters over the years, and even after that, and again, I recognize that in hindsight, what I did could have been misconstrued. And I always say I don't apologize for what I did, but I apologize for the fact that it missed. It was maybe not well thought out or whatever. And again, I say we view the world through the lens of our own biases. I assume when I'm up there being genuine, people are going to think, wow, he's being genuine, not, you know what, Gary didn't say that about Steve, and I don't believe him, and he actually said this and that, and it's Those are those landmines. And I will hear from people in the family, and this is where I get frustrated that, everybody's upset. Well, who's everybody and why? They won't say. Then I go to another function, and some people are short or won't look, and some people are okay and act like nothing. But in my head, I don't know if they're mad at me because they're having a bad day, mad at me because I said something offensive at the party, or someone's really upset at me but acting happy. And as I mentioned, without going again into a vast history of it, now so much of my life is spent consciously, maybe hyper to a bad degree. But I'm focused on making sure I'm not like him, and it's tough. And it's tough for another reason. I'll go into it very quickly because I'm isolated and don't have anyone to talk to. But there are times that, I get angry, and I say anger is not right or wrong. Anger is an indicator. How you react to the anger is up to you. If someone comes up and says, you let me borrow your car and I smashed it, I have a reason to be angry. Now, maybe I want to say, well, are you okay? Obviously, depending on what's on the phone, whatever, but even if I'm angry, I cannot immediately say, well, what did you do? And give me how are you going to recompensate me for wrecking my car? There are other things, or there are ways to address it. And so there are times where, again, with my kids or personally, with, people in general or family in general, there are times, and there are times people have literally said, you're like your father, and sometimes it's positively, sometimes it's negatively. Sometimes they meant it positively, but because of the way my relationship with my father is, it was negative and vice versa. And he hasn't seen his grandkids again in years. And I can't help but sit and, I tried to practice self-awareness, but I also try to practice empathy for others. And when I do with him, it's an exercise in futility, because I do, and this is one of the, I say, where I need to sit here and think. And I guess, this is the first time I'm actually saying it, so it's hard to hear, but in all of it, I'm like, am I worse than my father? Because, and this is where I just say I'm paradoxical, where I think in maybe socially or personally, I'm worse than my father. In way worse, I'll use that term, but I'll explain it more. But a better father. And I'm okay with that trade-off, because, but what I was getting at was, in all this, my father, throughout his life, beat up and punched his wife, his kids, wives, ruined people's lives. To his children, another story. My sister and I were living with my mom. My brother was with my dad. My dad was remarried. made it a big thing to take all of his family to Phantom of the Opera. He took my brother, my sister, his new married, again, I don't care right now, wife, and excluded me purposely and pointedly. And again, didn't go to my graduation, made a point not to do that. I'm a middle child in between going to the other two. So it's just, so that, I don't want to, I don't particularly care. There's no reason not to. Berated people, his wives that were not my mother just ruined them. There are people who don't want, there are his exes who, again, will not speak with me because of the trauma my father caused them and their family. In all this, if my uncle or my aunt does not want to talk to me because the man who did all that to me and other people is still the same person, never apologized, never looked me in the face and said I'm sorry, because again, I said I want to empathize. So I think, what would I do if I was dying and I have not seen my grandkids, and my son who understand, after I beat up and punched and ruined his mother's life and destroyed his life and made him through so many landmines and so much toxicity out that he cannot even navigate a normal relationship with his aunts and uncles, I should maybe just try to say, I'm sorry, Stephen. Even if you don't accept that, I am sorry, because that's what I would do. When my daughters go to my exes for 2 weeks, now even in that 2 weeks, they will come spend the night. I will see them. I'll take them to dinners, things like that. In that 2 weeks, it's torture not being with my children. I did not sign up to not be with my kids half of the time. The courts and my ex decided that for me. And since then, I've had to live tortured. And my father doesn't care. How can you live like that? And again, I tried to humanize all this, and that was before he told my brother, after my brother trying to navigate my father's condition getting worse, saying, hey, we're having my brother got a new house, had people over, got a boat, didn't invite me, but invited my ex with my kids, invites my father, and my father takes it as, a personal attack, and then again, that leads to him with all that. He's dying of cancer, and he's screaming at the doctors, screaming at them. His wife, his newest victim, is beside him, not saying, you're wrong, Gary O, slow down, or you're wrong, don't talk to them that way, listen to them. She's saying, quiet down, you're going to get kicked out, you're screaming, just quiet down. Which he takes as, you're not supporting me, and he kicks her out and removes her from the list. Now, to some people, you'd be like, there's probably more to that. But there's not. That's the way my father is. The moment you're not of that benefit, he's willing to write you off. He told her, I'll leave. And again, people don't realize in that he's not joking. That's him. And everyone is willing to write off excuses. And again, this is coming out, maybe I'm mad about this, but they'll make excuses for him, but not the kid he punched, the kid who I don't remember big chunks of my childhood because of him. There's times I remember things up until him coming home, and whatever happened was so traumatic I don't remember. I remember living my life in fear. Now, and this is, again, the legacy of a father. I'm a MGTOW. I'm masculine, but I struggle with over femininity. There's over masculization, over femininity. I'm very emotional. Because I'm aware of it, I've learned to balance it out. And again, emotions are they're not answers, they're indicators. So if I'm feeling upset, either I'm upset or something mentally is off where something that's upsetting me shouldn't be, and it is. So again, these are indicators. He's just, Again, I can't. I've spent so much time and trying to humanize him, and again, people won't give the kid who had that done to him the same understanding they give the guy doing it. I I give him more understanding than any has given to me in the way I've. And again, that's what is so frustrating to me. Anytime I mention the wives, things, and that, so, one way my father would use me is he'd get this new wife or interest and rebuild my relationship with Steve. And the moment the divorce happened or when it started to happen, I'm gone. And again, what he'll tell his family is Steve abandoned me and said these things. Again, I don't. This is one of those moments I'm going to say something that sounds cruel, but I mean this from the purest place. I don't believe in God the same way most people do if they believe. I'm a deist. But I hope there's God in heaven, because I believe no person on this earth can sort my dad out. I want I want better for my father. But again, where I was going is, I don't think anybody but a God, if God exists, sorry, I hit the mic. I don't think anybody but if God exists can help my father. I don't know if he wants to. Part of this is the legacy of his father, because his father was arguably worse than him. And this is one of those ways I try to go about humanizing him. I'm going to pause this, not for anything crazy. I just want to blow my nose because that's kind of gross. So, in fact, I'm not even going to pause. I'll edit it now.
You see this part, the sandal.
Sandal, yes.
Sandal.
Yes. You got hit.
Remember this part? Yes. I said this no more.
Yes.
This.
Edit it out.
Adenana.
Edit it out.
Adenana.
You want me to edit it out?
Adenana.
Edit it out.
Adenana.
Edit it out.
Adana.
Edit it out.
Adenana.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
No show.
Adenana.
Edit it out.
Okay.
This is the legacy of fathers. This is why I sacrifice as much as I do, and always try to look for ways to sacrifice more for my kids, not at the expense of my kids. And that's where I say I'm thankful I had a father like that, because I broke the cycle and I will never do that. So I guess this sounds very twisted, but the more I went through, the more I am consciously, firsthand, directly aware of not to make to make sure I avoid with my kids, if that makes sense again. Because consciously, I have to try to, via self-awareness, and this is where it gets exhaustive. And but hyper fixating on all my actions can get very tiresome, and it can be unhealthy as opposed to healthy. And where I struggle, that's where where I struggle is because I'm isolated, the only feedback I get are ex- expected social interactions and positive ones. So specifically about being a father. I am a good father. I don't care. I want to be better. I want to if I can make my kid happy or not. Again, so my kids get in trouble and it's so important to me to navigate them because I even tell them, my youngest especially, because she cries, and I just explained to her that because she gets scared she's in trouble. She says it, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. And I say to her, like, I'm not trying to scare you, I'm not trying to ground you, and I don't want to do this. I want you to learn your lesson. We're only having this talk because you did whatever it was that you did. And then depending on, again, whether it has happened a lot, a first, or whatever, we move on from there. But I just want them to understand, like, I never want my kids to want to have to, or to subconsciously forget their childhood. Not a moment. But I need to balance that with the times they need discipline, the times they get in trouble, the time they need guidance. And as I mentioned, those are the times where, this is where I'm pro marriage to a degree, in that the way a normal marriage would work is, the husband would get upset, or the wife, whatever, generally speaking, it's the husband, and the wife would say, okay, honey, I got this, and then, do you understand, honey, why you upset your dad, and maybe go apologize, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But that system is broken, and again, going back to, in one of the things that I'm upset about in general is that's not something I wanted. Yeah, now the legacy, again, having a father that makes you so terrified to even go home sets you up in this kind of position where the next male figure in my life was a child molester. So it is kind of ironic that, again, I compare rape to being divorced, and how I personally, in my experience, being divorced was more traumatic than being raped as a kid. And even if you don't agree with that, the only, you should probably only be in the position of if both of those things happen to you, to criticize me for it. And that was, again, twistedly, and just in the way that only a kid in that circumstance could make sense, was preferable to going home to my father. My next father figure was my mom's next husband, and I was for a phase in my life I was straight edge, which is I didn't drink, do drugs, or anything like that. I use the term because again it was such a phase in my life or whatever. But I didn't do it. And again, the reason it was important is because at that age as a kid, almost everybody else was drinking and doing drugs, having sex. I wasn't doing that. So my that stepfather drove me. It may, in fact, this I think it was a suppose. This is again my life in general, where so even if it was supposed to be a bonding thing, I never even thought about it till now. That's even worse. But outside of that context, he took me someplace, and him and his buddy were smoking weed in the car. They go and park and offer me weed, and I'm, hey, you want to smoke? And I'm like, no, I don't, I don't do drugs. And so again, I think at that point maybe they thought it was a, test or something like, okay, yeah, we know you don't do drugs, here. Like, no, really, like I don't do drugs. I'm good, thanks. And then he kind of looks at his buddy, Steve, ironically same name, and and his face just changed. And that's again something I remember in my father, how he could just be going from this kind of face and then in an instant again, and I don't get it. That look of looking you in the eye and again his wording is, if you tell anybody about this, I'll fucking kill you. A little bit of context, he was a very avid gun collector at the time, which I thought was kind of cool, knife collector at the time. So, that was my next male experience. Also preferable to either of the experiences prior. Again, that is the legacy of being a father who is egocentric and self-centered. I don't know. And that is one other thing. Again, it's so good doing this because sadly I've had to resort to talking to monitors and myself, but this is kind of like talking to a person. It's a very organic conversation. I don't want to be a good father comparatively to my father. Now, my complex may be that I'm hearing that when people aren't saying it, or not hearing it if they are. I don't know. Again, and this is where I wish I had some social. I say my social circle is me, and some people may think, well, you have your kids, and again, this stuff is not stuff I'm talking to my 12-year-old about. If children were the end all be all to happiness, anyone with kids would never get divorced. They would just be happy. I think I'm going to end it here because now I have to go edit all this, watch it, and again, go through it mentally, just watch. And, I that's one of the issues with this, and it's why this is very important to me. I eat a lot of crap and I make decisions a lot slower than other people in terms of my relationship status with others, and more specifically when I'm willing to terminate that. And just as an example, and this is I'll just make up a hypothetical, but these have happened in different ways. But just say, because again, I don't limit this just to text messages. I don't, if I text message you 5 times and don't get a response, I'm not saying then we're done. But I'm just going to limit this to that just for this as an example. So I message you, hey, let's hang out. Sure. Like, well, sure what? So I'm like, okay, when are you available? Let me get back to you. They don't get back to me. Hey, man, what's going on? Oh, nothing. Sorry about that. I was busy and forgot to get back to you. Yeah, no worries. Hey, you want to get together? Yeah. Yeah, when? Oh, well, what about next week? Do you want me to message you or should I message, you? Let me get back with you. They don't. X amount of time, and again, and so it once about the eighth or ninth time of me just basically, hey, do you want to hang out? Yes, but I don't want to. But you know, I'll say I'm not doing this anymore. If you wanted to do something with me, one of the 10 times we've interacted, we made plans and didn't, or blah blah blah, and I call it and blah all these things. I'm not doing that anymore. I get the picture that you're painting. Now you may think you're painting another picture, but I understand that you're 0 for 10 and you don't get it. Even when I told you, again, I'm not very indirect with people. I'm confrontational. I call myself a confrontationalist. So I'll say, hey, you haven't been responding. Hey, why haven't you and these things, and it's excuse, and I, oh, busy next time. Oh, oh yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah, but it never develops. After the 15th or 20th time, I'm okay with it, but that's hard for me to look back on. So when people will ask me, why don't you talk to so and so anymore? It can be traumatic for me depending on the person, because again, once I do that, I try never to think about it again. And because I don't have people in my life, no one asks, hey, why don't you talk to these people anymore? But then if someone does, they'll say, oh, what, blah blah blah, how come? And it's like, why don't I talk to them anymore? Oh yeah, the reason. And again, it's I don't know. And the last thing I'm going to end this on, and this is just something I constantly navigate in my head, a thought exercise of sorts, whatever. Right now, I know of people, you know of people, and people exist who are literally punching their husband or wife, yelling at their kids. They have gambling addictions. Awful people. The list goes on of just things that you would do and not allow someone to be in your life for. And they have people in their lives. My father has done all those things and has people fighting to stay in his life. I want to tell his current wife, run. Please. Like, it's going to be hard to run, but it's going to be hard at whatever point it happens, whether if he died, or maybe she's hoping that death is a closure. I don't know, but I don't like reliving those things. When I don't know, I say like it's some of them are traumatic. Going through all this stuff is just again, all of this is within the microcosm of my divorce, my addiction, my losing the house, my mom dying, my father trying. It would have been so much easier, and this was where I will end this. So much easier if I just didn't care about my father. That's the big irony of this. Oh, and that's what I was kind of going at. But all these people, I'm going to backtrack again, but are doing these detestable things, and whatever it is about me is so detestable that the only people who want to be around me are my 3 kids. And this is where I start to worry personally. Maybe it's because they don't know better at this age. Those are things where I just need to. I would rather be asking myself those questions unnecessarily or be wrong than not ask those questions when I should be. But this has been interesting and a mess. And I'm not looking forward to editing it. But I hope I hope everything is going well with you and you're taking care of yourselves and the ones you love. Go easy and let me know what's going on with you in the comments below if you made it this far. And if you made it this far, man, I owe you like a beer or something. Let's go to the bar and I don't drink anymore, but I'll buy you one. So go easy.